Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the limbo side of things. I love that Ted and Alaric are like living it up. They're like, yeah, we found the gin, but Landon's the only one that's not. Like, it's like, no. Djinns, like they're tricksters, they will screw you over. He's mainly talking about it from a Dungeons and Dragon campaign, but even I'm like, yeah. Well, we as the audience also know because once again, Lizzie dealt with one. Granted, she doesn't remember, but like she got like the wool pulled over her eyes and was manipulated the entire time, which this djinn does. Basically, the price is, oh, you don't have to worry about coins. The price is going to be your souls. So each of you get one wish each. So you better make it count. So obviously, Ted doesn't want to take the chance because it's like, right, he kind of very much enjoys his soul and stuff like that. Being stuck here for eternity is one thing. Losing his soul, that's another. So he wants to use his wish for peace. But it's like, cool. Alaric and Landon are like, cool, let us use our first two wishes. And if we fail, at the end of the day, you can still use your final wish to go to peace. So they just have to be careful about how they craft their wishes, and they ended up being like, hey, bring us all back to life is Landon's first wish. Problem is, and that's the tricky wordplay of it all, is Alaric isn't dead. He's in a coma. That's the problem. And it's just like, that's semantics. But it's also like the djinn's like, yeah, but I'm not psychic. How would I have known that? He's like, yes, I didn't tell you everything. I knew that the ferryman would eventually track you down. But he's also playing coy with them. Like everything is for the purpose of, we find out later on, he has his own motivation, just like the previous djinn did. It's like, oh, wanted to trick Lizzie because like the moment it done all its wishes, it's like, oh, cool. Also double bird middle fingers to you because I'm about to bounce by. And she gets away. Because it turns out this djinn apparently, like, you know, you spend so many times basically tricking people with wishes. Eventually, a human caught up with him and killed him, which Ted's like, I get it. You can't go fooling and messing with people for too long before it finally catches up with you. They're kind of two peas in a pod in that regard of like, yeah, you know. But this djinn, basically, the only way he can get to peace is if he basically has a long list of redemption he has to do. And so basically he's like getting people to work off that debt for him. And I even love Ted's being like, it's essentially a pyramid scheme. You're bringing in people to work it off and you kind of reap the benefits the most. And it's like, yeah, you're kind of helping them in turn, but in turn they're helping you and you're trying to get more and more people in it. Exactly like a pyramid scheme. Apparently one of the people involved is Elvis. So that's interesting. Interesting timing too, because obviously like the Baz Luhrmann's like Elvis movie, like obviously the trailer dropped like a little while back, but you know that's kind of in the zeitgeist and stuff like that. So yeah, so there's that that kind of screwed them over technically. So when they come back, I was like, well, of course he wouldn't be here. He'd be in the hospital. But it's like, right, that's also why I was like, oh, I expected him to eventually show up because I'm like, oh, he's back in his body. But it's like, right, they never buried him because a lot of time he was in the hospital and stuff. Which I love that like Landon's grave is basically a quote that Wade put up there, and then also it's like, oh, the Ted, you know. So I love the article in front of it and everything. But they also avoided telling anyone else they were alive too, because but then to add to all that, the further manipulation of the djinn being like, oh, might want to basically be careful because the sudden realization of your back and like the mental toll it would take on people. I was like, would that really, I guess maybe on a like magical level it would just screw with people's brains a little too much, but I'm like, would it, I didn't really get that part too much. You know, maybe I just didn't quite grasp the explanation. I'm like, people coming back to life shouldn't be too much of a problem, considering the fact is Landon was a phoenix and people know he died and came back. So it wasn't that good. But I guess it's like, right, you basically shatter people's reality. It's like, I guess they haven't had too much experience with people dying and coming back. They haven't, but I mean, we as the audience have, because it's happened so many times, especially Alaric. He's one of those, him and Jeremy, like, dropped dead often and came back because of those rings, to be fair, until they found out, like, oh yeah, that totally makes you go a little psycho. That whole storyline. So it's like, yeah, like, I guess the kids at the Salvatore school wouldn't be too used to that. But still, like, Landon's kind of like, you've dealt with it enough, but I guess it's like, right, it's just about, it shattered their realities about, like, what death is and everything. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's just like almost like a magical, psychological like thing that would just happen would be the byproduct. That's my understanding. Like I said, I must have missed like some part of the explanation. I'm like, that just seems weird. Like it seemed like there'd be no issues with that, but it's like, don't want to cause a mental break or anything. But it didn't matter. The ferryman found out. I love it. It's like, oh, don't worry, we locked the door. Oh, cool, he could just phase through it because it's the ferryman, and like it from the afterlife. He can do whatever he wants. The natural laws of the living world probably mean nothing to him. So they kind of got screwed over at that point, and like I said, they learned about the Jin situation, and of course, when Alaric is alone, you're like, yep, he's gonna take advantage of the situation. And the moment Ted's eye turned a different color, I was like, you made him a necromancer again? That is the douchiest thing you could do, especially after all the progress Ted has made. Obviously, even before coming to Limbo, he rehabbed himself. He was a good person again. He sacrificed himself. I was like, oh man, he's going back to being a bad guy. It's like, nope. He actually sacrificed himself and died a hero. Granted, it doesn't make up for all the terrible stuff he did, but it was a start. And then subsequently, since being around Alaric and Landon helped that. But now it's like, yeah, this is a very backstabby thing to do. And it's so sad because in that moment, he's losing himself. He's no longer Ted anymore. He's like, oh, I'm the necromancer again. And it's like, ooh, the ferryman's going to shake upon hearing my name. And they were like, Ted? He's like, no, the necromancer's the name he's going to be shaking in his bones for. I also appreciate Landon going to visit Wade, but Wade is like, really, if you were a ghost, you know all that's going on. He's like, all right, just like explain everything to me. He's like, all right, because Emma's not here to give me therapy. This is my way of compensating with like losing my best butt, my boy Landon, plus everything else that's going on with Hope, Lizzie, Josie. And then he breaks it down to Landon, but Landon doesn't tell Alaric because it's like whatever's going on can be dealt with the moment we get back. But it's also because Landon, that's a sad thing. Landon's with two full-grown adults, but they're adults who've made mistakes in their lives that landed them here. Like, Landon here is here out of selflessness. Both of their actions kind of led them here. Like, Alaric has made mistakes in the past, but he's always tried to do the right thing. Problem is, he doesn't rely on people. He tries to shoulder everything on his own. Once again, if you know anything about my favorite, like, fictional character, which is Ring Schwarzer from the Trails of Cold Steel games, that's one of his biggest flaws, is that he shoulders everything on his own, and there ends up being so much catastrophe that kind of follows because of that. Alaric is literally the same way. He's got that same archetype. And so that's why Landon didn't tell him anything. He's like, if I told you, I knew you would do what you even without me prompting you, you still went and made a selfish wish making Ted the necromancer, because we were hoping like, oh yeah, like you were hoping that maybe him being Ted long enough would counterbalance, like, oh, he'll be the necromancer long enough, get some of his juice back, and then he can wish for peace afterwards. It's like, no, because you didn't account for the fact is you'd be bringing the necromancer back, and no amount of progress, all that progress was immediately undone the moment he became the necromancer again. Maybe Alaric was a little hopeful, considering his backup plan means he wasn't. He's the pragmatist that he is. He's hopeful, but he does have that pessimistic side of himself that kind of assumes the worst in people in certain regards. So he assumed the worst in Ted, and it worked out. To be fair, he didn't assume the worst in Ted, he assumed the worst in the necromancer. But he also gave, wanting to believe like, hey, I'm giving him an opportunity if it rises, but Ted was initially going to be like, no, you know what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use my final wish to make you suffer and stuff like that. I'm not even going to go to paradise. I'm going to stay here because this is kind of like where he can reign supreme. I mean, the necromancer in Limbo, it's like, oh, like this is like probably heaven to him. But Landon's like, you might want to, like, after spilling everything that went down, it's like, yeah, you might want to send us back because it's going to practically be hell back there because nothing's the way we want it to be. But also, once again, Landon knew Alaric would make the terrible mistakes like he always does. It's like the moment we get back, you'd be so focused and you'd panic about everything. Hell, even Necromancer's like, oh, the moment he gets back, he'll have a heart attack and probably end up right back here just because everything went super sideways while they were going, so. And now you add in all that, and, the Necromancer's like, yeah, I'm going to let him go, but you're going to have to stay, because he's going to have to live with the guilt of, he's going to try and fix everything, but countless time and time again, even when he tries to fix things, it kind of blows up in his face. So not only is he going to fail everyone back there, he's also going to know that he's there failing while you, the actually really good person, is back here. Because the whole conversation was like, right, people can change, but it's like, yeah, Landon's not so sure about that. He hopes, but it's like, right, seeing what happened to Ted is kind of proof. The fact is that Alaric made this wish behind their backs, kind of proof. It's supposed to be a team effort thing, But that's even what Landon said went wrong with the Dungeons and Dragon campaign, was like, yeah, like, we turned against each other. We didn't think rather than keeping our wishes simple and clear, we went behind it. Like, you know, it's that selfishness kind of gets the best of people sometimes. So, Alaric gets sent on his way. He's back, which I think is actually really sweet. Caleb's his emergency contact. It's like, I guess it's like Caroline's away, so there's no guarantee that she would be able to get there anyway. But I think that's super sweet that Caleb is. That's all. I mean, to be fair, it became like drinking buds, you know. But also Wade's there to be the first person to see him when he was like, I'm like, hey, Wade. And it's like, yeah, I got to fill you in on everything. But Alaric does seem like he's taking Landon's advice, and it's like, oh, okay. So I'm gonna wait till Caleb gets here so we can all gather around. Because we're also still dealing, well, he has to be filled in about, I'm assuming Wade told him about the Ben thing. Him being the one that attracted monsters, so there's that going to be the angle to it. But also, let's not forget, Cleo's not in a good condition right now. She can't even use magic without it hurting her. So no inspiring any ideas for people right now. No being amused right now. So whatever they come up with, they're going to have to come up with on their own. Then you had, once again, Alaric's last middle finger to Ted / the Necromancer. He tries to wish for... God, what was it? It was something selfish anyway. And it's like, and your wish is null and void. You basically wasted your third wish. Because Alaric made it so that, basically, if you wish for anything other than peace, you would automatically lose your... It was like a final middle finger, and even Landon's laughing like, oh, he set you up. He did think this through enough. You know, and it's like, right, it is, and like with every wish, it is of your own making. You could have made the right choice and gone to peace, but you didn't. You wanted revenge, you wanted power, and so now you're stuck here. And Landon's like, well, he's not too broken up about it, you know, and I even love, like, Ted's so upset that he's okay with everything, because he's like, I'll make this a hell for you. And he's like, oh, I don't think so. And he smashes his glass. And even later on, taking Landon's glass, because Landon's like, right, you can try and make this a hell, but he's like, in a process, let's see if you can do that before I can find a way to make it so that you can find your way to peace. Because it's like, right, I wish I could go back and help the people I care about, but I'm at least stuck here in a place where I can help people. So it's a win-win. I can at least help someone in some regard. If I can't help the people I care about, I can do some good here in Limbo. So stuck working for the oh right, that's the wish that the Necromancer tried to do, was break the contract and in turn voided his wish, and so on and so forth. So now they're part of the Jin's pyramid scheme. I'm excited to see who else they cross paths with. How they end up helping people is definitely going to be interesting. So this duo by themselves, like these mortal enemies of sorts, it's like, yeah, it's almost befitting that you two would be here stuck together. Yet again, it's like you guys cannot get away from each other. There's always something binding and tying you together. It's almost like, oh, back when we were stuck inside of Malivore together. It's like, it was like that again, so that's interesting. So it's only it feels only right that the circumstances would be what they are. So we have that. Then on the other side of things, we have Aurora, you know, trying to figure out this godhood stuff. Problem is, though, that despite all that, like, the more time goes by with every inspirational thought she's having, she's losing it bit by bit. So I didn't know that, I guess, because generally speaking, the inspiration, it's only supposed to be like a one shot, and this is all about, like, oh, giving her inspiring ideas. For, like, I guess, like, it's just interesting to know, like, because the mojo, I guess, always works towards one single idea, but I don't think they've ever really processed that before, that, like, basically the longer you spend on the inspiration, the more you're draining it. It's not like a permabuff. I thought, like, once the idea is complete, then it goes away, because it was all towards that one goal. So it has to be a goal that you probably have to be obtainable within a point, because once that inspiration leads to another bit of inspiration, it starts dimming the inspiration, the light, little by little. And, like, that's such a fascinating thing, because that way you're not stuck in muse mode the entire time. It's like you got to use it while you got it, because the longer you're using it, the more it wipes and drains. So they end up capturing Aurora, but rather than going straight for the kill, Hope is a little petty this episode. She wants her... Well, first and foremost, she's trying to find out what Aurora is trying to do. And you have Hope going about this in a very torturous way. You're like, yeah, that's some Alaric stuff right there. I mean, not Alaric, Klaus stuff. It's like, ooh, she has become too much like her dad. It's like, that's the thing. Klaus had his evil side, but even though he had his evil side, he still managed to, like, she's like 100% like dark side Klaus. Klaus was still, at least percentage wise, even if he was like 70% evil, there was like a 30% good in him that ended up winning in the end sometimes. This episode also presented something I didn't even think about at the end of the series. Maybe people thought about it, didn't even cross my mind. Tristan's dead. He's not just at the bottom of the ocean, he's dead. Because he died the moment Elijah decided to die. I was like, right, once again, it's that whole sire bloodline thing was only like a season 3 thing. They never really circled back to it too much. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure it didn't cross my mind then. Elijah killing himself was kind of like, I got it, it was like for family and stuff, but it was also kind of selfish because it's like, you pretty much killed anyone that was alive that was tied to your bloodline. I guess you could hope that most of those people are already dead. I mean, Tristan you don't care about, but still like, because I was like, right, the only one they actually, and do correct me in the comments down below, was Klaus the only one whose bloodline they severed? Because that was the point of it. That's why like Stefan and Damon and Catherine and Elena ended up being okay. Well, because that was the whole point, was because like, right, we got to deal with Klaus, sever our connection to his bloodline. Granted, it ended up happening anyway. But like I said, if I remember correctly, because I'm trying to remember who was, I guess because Aurora and him were a thing, so it's like, is she from Rebecca's bloodline or is she from Klaus's? Once again, let me know in the comments. It feels like forever ago. That was years ago. Once again, that was season 3 of the originals after we've already gone into now 4 seasons of Legacy. So that was, what? Like 6 years ago? 6 or 7-ish years ago? So it's like, yeah. Regardless, I'm going on a tangent. I do apologize. But I'd say, like, I can't remember if she was part of Klaus's bloodline, because that means that connection's severed. But I would assume she's from Rebecca's, isn't she? Then she might be from Rebecca's, but I think she's from Klaus's. I don't remember. But it's like I said, it makes that whole Elijah sacrificing himself thing even more like, oh, that's kind of dickish, isn't it? But like I said, that most of the people who were probably left in his bloodline are either dead or he didn't. It is a very selfish thing to think about. Like once again, I definitely don't remember that crossing my mind when he decided to kill himself. If I said anything, I'll be super surprised, but I don't think it crossed my mind at the time. There are probably plenty of fans being like, that's not bloodline thing still happening then. There's probably plenty of people who said something back then. I was kind of out of the loop with that. I didn't even think about it. I was like, that's depressing. It's not like, oh, I can fight. Like, that's why she's so hell-bent on revenge, because she has nothing left. She can't get revenge on Klaus. He's dead. He got to die being the hero, too, so that just rubs the wound a little bit deeper. It's like, right, you had me locked up. You're the reason why I became... Aurora always had, like, a little bit of her issues, once again, and, like, becoming a vampire just, like, heightened that. And I love that they have made this parallel that, like, that's why Lizzie's so sympathetic to Aurora. I was like, oh, there's actually really interesting parallels between, like, both of you do kind of have, like, some, like, there's some chemical imbalances going on in your brains that, like, both of you realize, like, right, because she's like, the way people treat Aurora, she's like, I remember people treating me the same way anytime I'd have one of my episodes. So she found commonality. That's why she was sympathetic to, like, right, why is Aurora doing all this? For love. It's like, right, what was done to her brother, she wanted revenge, like, for what, the way Klaus treated her, locked her up the way she was. I mean, granted, he kind of got his comeuppance, all, like, those, wasn't it 5 years in between season 3 and 4 that Marcellus had him locked up? So, plus everything with the hollow at the end, sacrificing himself for his family, but that's the thing. Once again, for Aurora, it's like, you get to be the good guy. It's not fair that you get to die being the good guy. I don't get my revenge. That's why she's so hell-bent on getting revenge against Hope. It's like, it's the only way she can, like, balance the scales again in her mind. But Lizzie's not all about the torture. It's like taking off her sun ring so that, like, she burns in the sunlight. Then her mind gets a little fractured. So, like, you know, all Lizzie had to do was play the role of Tristan, pretending to be her brother because her mind's scattered. And it's like, right, it's not your fault my mind's broken and I thought you were my brother. So, but kind of got an idea of, like, right, the sarcophagus meant was meant for protection. That means there's a god here walking, which they've met the god, and Vulcan, which that actress just saw her in this past week's episode of The Flash, interestingly enough. I'm assuming that was kind of like a one-off thing. I think she's probably going to more regularly pop up in this, but still, once again, I always think that's so. I'm sure everything's like filmed in the same area. It's like they're filmed on the same lot in Vancouver because that's where like most CW stuff is filmed, is in Vancouver. So I'm assuming like that's why it's always a thing of like I'm sure there's a lot of like casting directors and stuff like that, because there's a lot of like, I'm sure, like crossover between all the different shows of all the people that are connected and involved. So like, you know, when someone pops up in something, you're like, there's a good chance they're going to most likely, unless like they're a main person in something else. I mean, that doesn't always mean anything, because I mean, like Raul Coley popped up in like an episode of Supergirl, you know, even though being like one of the main characters in iZombie, you know, so that doesn't always mean anything. But typically, like, unless you're like a mainstay in something else, unless like you're leaving one show and then popping up in another, like Olivia Leong or the actor who plays Raphael, like Rafi, he's on that All American like Homecoming, that new spinoff. So it's like stuff like that. But typically, is like if you see someone, there's a good chance you might see them pop up in something else CW related, or you know, so. Probably just anything in general that might be filming in Vancouver. It's just an interesting thing. That's all that, you know, just kind of a behind the scenes thing that's always interesting to me. But you know her name. Her name's Vulcan. Which I'm like, God, if I'm not, the name sounds familiar God-wise. Vulcan. I want to say that's one of the, wasn't that, oh my God, I'm blanking on, is it Corbin Benson? He played Henry Spencer, Sean's dad, on Psych. Wasn't that his character's name in American Gods? Wasn't he Vulcan? So isn't like Vulcan like a war god of sorts? Maybe I'm tripping. That was a season 1 thing, so I could be. But the name Vulcan, because I've also been seeing it recently, because I'm playing through the Trails of Cold Steel games again, because I love to reference them every chance I get. But that's one of the quartz is Vulcan. But I'm like, the name Vulcan as a god does sound familiar. Her other name sounded, it could, like the H name, I'm going to butcher it. It sounded familiar too. Like, my mythology is garbage at best. Like I said, that's putting it mildly. It's garbage at best. Because I know, like, the smallest amount about Norse mythology. I know a little bit here and there about Japanese mythology, and I know just a small amount of Greek mythology. And that's also the thing too, like so many mythologies, also people warp them to be whatever they want them to be. It's like, oh, you can always pull an Almighty Johnson and just make things what you want them to be, type of thing. But yeah, that's kind of my whole point. Like, it sounds familiar. I kind of probably don't, I could do some deep diving, because even if I do, like, who's to say, like, whether they'll pull directly from the mythology for that. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that front. I even love that, I'm going on all these large tangents, I'm sorry, but I love that Hope made a version of that dagger, the one that was actually put inside of Klaus. That's why it was almost her ultimate revenge. She made her own makeshift version. That was metal as hell, because the knife, like, at least it's like a stab wound and it goes inside your body. That thing spun like a damn Beyblade ripping into Aurora's flesh. That was gnarly as hell, dude. It was just like, I was like, that is something straight out of a horror movie. That was graphic. I don't know why, like, sometimes I forget, like, how graphic you can get with that. Just, I don't know why. That just, I'm like, is that something you can really do on the CW? That seemed brutal. Because I'm thinking that what this TV show is, like, TV 14 or something. Like, that seemed extra brutal for TV. Like, once again, I guess my mind of what you can get away with in ratings, so I guess it's like, as long as you do it, like, every once in a while and not, like, it's a continuous thing, it's fine. That just seemed extraordinarily brutal, but that could also be the thing of, maybe I'm forgetting every brutal thing that's ever happened over the course of these series, but I feel like that's pretty brutal for this show, in my opinion. But for Hope, it was a little injustice suing by doing that. It's like, you got the information, there's always like, yeah, but it's still like, no, I want my revenge. I even love that Lizzie's like, yeah, there's something going on here. You're saying you don't feel anything, but you're feeling the need for revenge. It's like, right, like, you can probably potentially find some other way around this, because she gets it, but it's also like, right, your dad isn't dead, he's in a coma, your sister isn't dead, she's gone, but me, it's like, Hope has a little family left, the little family she does have, the one that came to check on her, she pushed her away, that being Rebecca, when she came to check up on her. But other than that, it's also like, your family, don't kind of compare yourself to Aurora, but she does. She found some connection between them, and she even broke the sire bond, which is not an easy thing to do. But the fact is, she even suggests, like, maybe because of the way her mind is, it might have actually given her the strength. She always thought of her mind as a weakness. It's like, my mind kind of being splintered the way it is somewhat actually probably benefited me in the long run, because I was able to break the sire bond from Hope, because I didn't want to do that anymore, because it's like, right, us doing this is monstrous. Like, yeah, she might be a monster, but she's a monster for the reason, I mean, even Klaus became the monster he became because multitude of things, because the reason, like, once again, becoming what they became amplified what was already there. Klaus was abused by their father. They all were, but Klaus got it the most because he was also, because also you're abomination because of what you are. Amongst, like, obviously he hunted down and wanted to kill all his children. Klaus was the biggest abomination in his mind because Klaus was always weak and was never, well, Klaus was also never his, so there was also that level of that as well. But that abuse from his father is what warped him into the monster he became. Just, you know, it's just like, he just finally had the strength and power to fight back, you know? Especially being like, yeah, he might have been like his siblings, but at the time, for a long time, he was the only hybrid. And even then, when there were other hybrids, he eventually killed all of them. Then Tyler was a hybrid, but then Tyler was no longer a hybrid. Then it became only him and Haley. And so, yeah, there's a lot to that. So he always felt so alone, could never connect with anyone, because there was always a distance between him and his siblings, because none of them would ever be able to understand what it was like to be him. Yes, they suffered their father's wrath, but not the way he did. His father, just a special type of hatred he dished out just for Klaus, you know? So there are monsters born in different ways. Hope's monster was born because it's also like, right, you, your reason why your humanity went off is because you killed someone out of love. You killed a person you love. So it's like, you can't deny that there's some emotions in this. And even later on, like, despite her trying to burying it, there's some of it floating to the surface, which I'm like, I don't know if we've ever really seen that. When someone's humanity's completely off until, like, the thing happens to flip it back on fully, I don't know. I don't think we've ever seen someone in between lanes like she is, because it felt like she was feeling things. She was like, I'm even feeling betrayal. Like, what Lizzie was saying was true. There's some level of that happening here, where there's something going on with her emotions. Like, she's it's almost like that emotional, that humanity switch is like halfway in between on and off. Like, it's I think she's teetering on that lane of being able to come back if given the right situation and circumstances. But Lizzie's not with her, doesn't have to answer to her anymore, because it's like, right, you were my friend, you are my friend. But yeah, so now instead of spending all that time going towards killing Hope, it's like, right, we can go to the gods. They have the powers, right? So we track down Vulcan. We try to get an answer to her parents, so that, like, you know, talk to her parents so they can rewind time back to when your brother was alive, back when my sister was here, my dad was okay, and Hope didn't flip off her switch. So it's like, yeah, Hope still plays a part in this. It's like, I can save Hope. I can stop her from doing all the terrible stuff she's done, because once that humanity's back on, she's going to have to live with every decision she's made. But that's part of the journey. She has to live with it. She shouldn't get an easy way out of like, yeah, let's just kind of rewind time. It's like, no, she has to suffer through it, because that's the only way she's going to grow, so that she never makes this mistake again, so she never goes down the dark side, slippery slope again. You know, she has to, that's the only way she can change and grow. Because if you take this away from her, when the time comes again, it might be a thing of, she won't have the tools ready to prepare herself for the struggles. It's all for the purpose of growing, so that you can learn from your mistakes and grow from them and become a better person. Like, I think Caroline grew a lot. You know, it made her face a lot when she finally got her humanity back on. It's an important journey that everyone who struggles with that has to go through. I think MG came out on the other side of, like, being a ripper and everything, plus his family. So it's kind of all in that personal growth line of things. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, whether or not that's all going to work out. I don't think, not unless Aurora ends up betraying her at the end, but they seem like they're same team side, right? Team same side right now, so I don't see that, but there's always a possibility. Either way, I'm excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.